real incomes. That's going to hit them for sure. But for the banks, what really matters is whether people are still paying off their debt. Now, on the flip side, of course, people probably won't take out new loans at higher cost, or they'll try and avoid that. So it's not all rosy for the banks, but I think that relative to previous cycles, yes, I agree, higher rates is helpful.
Sharon, on net, you've said they can be more defensive in this downturn, in this cycle. You and I talked about that last time. Have you seen clients become more receptive to that message? You've seen stocks behave that way?
So the banks have outperformed again recently. Well, they've outperformed the banks recently. They've been outperforming sector year to date, even though we've seen GDP slide. We've seen, as you mentioned earlier, PMIs in the mid-40s now. You would never have expected banks to have been an outperforming sector into that type of environment. So I do think that shows you can see banks behave a bit differently this time around. Clients, they are naturally sceptical about banks, and absolutely, banks tends to be more of a trade than something you want to hold longer term. But I think the fact that they are paying reasonably good dividends and the fact that they do benefit from higher interest rates, results so far look reasonably okay for the banks. That all provides some reassurance.
That's true of the whole of Europe, I think, not just the banks over the last 10 years, Sharon. Wonderful to hear from you. Sure. As always, Sharon Bell of Goldman Sachs on the financials, going into the ECB a little bit later. TK, I keep saying it because I'm still surprised by it. We're talking about another 75 from the ECB. With the data where it is, I get it, double-digit CPI, but the data's pretty weak in Europe right now, on the other side on output too.
I just don't get it. I don't get it on a nominal GDP basis and also a technology overlay. Does Lagarde come out and say, okay, we're going to dutifully do 75 beeps, and that's it? Does she say that?
They're worried about the second round effects, Tom. You know that from the inflation story. I get it too, and Lisa, they're worried that this becomes even more entrenched because of the supply side dynamic in the energy story.
Yeah, and not just that, but also some of the potential supply chain disruptions with respect to China and what's going on there. I mean, there are a lot of issues. This is the nightmare for central banks, is this stagflationary environment, and that is what they're all facing off with.
I think Mohammed called it a quagmire of stagflation.
That's
like
better.
a toxic brew.
A toxic brew.
It's a toxic
I tell you
brew.
what, that sounds deeply depressing, doesn't it?
Well,
a quagmire of stagflation.
Yeah, toxic brew. Nodes of concern.
Bramo's becoming more constructive. You noticed that, Tom?
Nodes of depression.
A whisper
Before she
of
said
optimism.
that. Jeremy Stretch coming up later over at CIBC. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Keeping you up to date with news from around the world with the first word, I'm Lisa Mateo. The European Central Bank set to lift its main interest rate to the highest in more than a decade. It's trying to lower record high inflation. Almost all economists surveyed by Bloomberg predict a second straight 75 basis point hike today. President Xi Jinping says China is willing to work with the U.S. to find ways to get along. The comments came before a possible meeting with President Biden next month at a Group of 20 summit. It signals an effort on Xi's part to maintain ties despite disputes over everything from Taiwan chips to the invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is accusing China of undermining the status quo that has kept both nations from going to war over Taiwan. Blinken spoke to Bloomberg in Washington. He said Beijing was trying to speed up its seizure of the island. China and Taiwan downplay the likelihood of an invasion anytime soon. Credit Suisse is planning a sweeping overhaul. It includes a $4.1 billion capital raise, a carve-out of its investment bank, and thousands of job cuts. It's the most urgent attempt yet to repair Credit Suisse after huge losses and management chaos. In breaking up the investment bank, the firm will create a separate advisory and capital markets business that will revive the first Boston branding. And the world's richest man told Twitter employees he does not plan to cut 75% of his staff. Bloomberg's learned that Elon Musk denied the numbers in an address to workers at the company's San Francisco office. Still, the billionaire is expected to cut staff when he takes over the company, causing anxiety among workers. The $44 billion deal set to close Friday. I'm Lisa Mateo. This is Bloomberg.
The standard way venture firms work is you commit capital, let's say over a 5-year investment period, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then the fund just typically lasts maybe 10 years or so.
15. Well, these days longer. So often 15. Often the tail extends out to 20 years because these companies take a long time to develop.
And somebody that invests in a venture fund today should be trying to get rates of return of 20%, would you say, or more?
Top end venture is sort of 3x net of fees. You ideally you're hoping for more than that. You're hoping for 5x or more. You're illiquid the entire time, right? So you would hope to get paid for the illiquidity.
And today,
so yeah, maybe 20 to 40% if things go well is sort of baseline.
Let's take another subject. Let's suppose somebody says, I don't want to invest in Andreessen Horowitz. I want to be Marc Andreessen. How does somebody become a venture capitalist? What are the skill sets for good venture capitalists? It is high degree of intelligence, hard work, a lot of luck, dress the right part, don't wear a tie. What are the things that make one a good venture capitalist?
So the highly successful VCs historically are very idiosyncratic. You have people from very different backgrounds. Mike Morris is a former newspaper reporter. John Doerr is a former chip salesman. You've got people with very different. Jim Breyer has more of this kind of blue chip investment background. You have people with very different backgrounds and experiences. And so I think it's some set of skills and some set of knowledge, and then there seems to be a taste component to it that's really hard to measure and really hard to predict.
Lots happening on Wall Street.
I think Jay Powell said things that were indefensible.
Need to catch up?
This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston.
We've got the information and insights.
We think that's the next secular shift.
From businesses most influential and instrumental.
It's knocking it out of the ballpark.
It's a challenging dynamic.
This is a level of uncertainty that we haven't had to deal with.
Bloomberg Wall Street Week, live Friday with replays all weekend on Bloomberg Television and Radio. Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite, positioning companies to meet the next generation of challenges, breaking out of traditional roles.
One of the most important things is looking around the corner.
Look for Chief Future Officer on Bloomberg. No one covers the world like Bloomberg.
Because Trussonomics is being dismantled, MPs behind the scenes are asking, what's the point of having her at the top?
Can the strong dollar amplify the world's risks of instability?
Xi Jinping said complete reunification must be realized.
With unmatched reach and resources from more than 120 countries, the moment news breaks, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg, your global business authority.
On the David Rubenstein Show, Peer-to-Peer Conversations, I uncover the untold stories of the world's most successful leaders. Watch Wednesdays on Bloomberg Television.
On October 30th, Brazilians head to the polls for a runoff vote between former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and incumbent Jair Bolsonaro. Bloomberg will be live from Sao Paulo as the nation decides on the future of Latin America's largest economy. Coverage begins Friday on Bloomberg, your global news authority.
What's changed is this. A decision by the government in Beijing that status quo was no longer acceptable, that they wanted to speed up the process by which they would pursue reunification.
That was Secretary Blinken, Antony Blinken, sitting down for an audience with Peggy Collins down in DC, TK. Bloomberg's very own. Very, very cool. Just yesterday, an audience with. Do you like that?
Yeah. I think it's important, and he's taking obviously the international view. But right now in Washington, based on the zeitgeist I see this morning, you click inside 2 weeks to an election. It's sort of like the United Kingdom. Maybe we're becoming as focused as the United Kingdom becomes focused.
You mean we're concentrating things a little bit more?
The mind is concentrating
for
both sides.
Months. Yeah. Don't we start the presidential race at the start of the year?
You guys do it better. That's all, well,
it's 2 years long.
Are you just trying to rub it in?
No, I'm trying to wind him up because I know
Yeah.
that he finds it ridiculous.
But he could push back and say you chose to live in this. So here you go. 2 years of joy.
I love it here.
Oh yeah.
You know I do. I'm very thankful for being a guest of this great country. I've said that repeatedly.
How's the rent search going?
I can talk about the rents in a very different fashion. Rents in Manhattan. Nuts. Honestly, Tom, absolutely insane.
Explain the difference between rents here and rents in London.
Well, the fee model's ridiculous. The idea that you'd pay 1 month rent on a 12-month lease
I agree.
as a fee is insane. And I see a lot more no-fee rentals coming on Street Easy and Zillow. You see much more of that. But the fact that's still a model in New York is in New York, I just think is unreal. Foreign to me, Tom. Foreign. But I am foreign, so
oh, yeah, it's okay. Personal finance today on Bloomberg, and we welcome all of you. She's familiar with the rents across the nation. Anne-Marie Horton joins us now, Bloomberg Washington correspondent. Anne-Marie, I know the territory along the Erie Canal of what was industrialized America, coming out of the Mohawk River Valley. There was Carrier in Syracuse. There was a company called Kodak in Rochester, and they are gone, gone, gone. The president will visit that shell of